Hey, Wes McDonald here, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Flat Rate World Live. And of course, my good buddy Kenneth Edmonds is with me. How are you, Ken?
I am fine. I'm sitting here on my home beach. Life is really nice. Actually, I'm sitting in my office with a picture behind me, but in my mind, I'll be on the beach very quickly, though.
That's right. I know before the show, we were actually talking about some of your new travel adventures coming up. So, as always, I am very jealous. And I enjoy your background much more than mine. So you've got the tropical background. I've got the tropical shirt. So we're we're at least in coordination. And everyone that's tuned in today, make sure that you leave. Oops. Make sure that you leave. See if I can learn how to do this again. Your questions and comments and join the conversation because it's a lot more fun. If you have positive comments, if you have negative ones, if you have questions, if you just want to talk about Ken's background behind him there, whatever you like, please do leave those comments. And there's Kenneth leaving his own comments so everyone knows how to do it. It's going to be a great discussion. And yes, I would absolutely agree because we do have a special guest today, Ken. And before we let him in, I'm excited about this today. You know, we are in an industry that has been changing so dramatically, so quickly. It's been absolutely terrifying on some days and exciting on others. But certainly we're all looking for more input and conversation from those that are looking at the industry from a broader perspective than we do on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, and I may have mentioned this last week. I don't remember. So if I did, I'm just going to be redundant. I don't care. There's another nickel word for you. I got invited to speak to a group of people. At least they've extended a tentative invitation, and it's a group of service managers they want me to talk to, and they want me to cheer them up. And you know, there is so many things that are challenges. You know, in the class I'm teaching right now, we're talking about hiring and retention. And there are so many adjustments that service managers and businesses in general need to make because we're not going back to where we were. So the path going forward can be bright and rosy, assuming that we're willing to adapt to the new reality. The people that think that they can do what they've always done, they're wrong. It's not going to work. You know, again, when McDonald's is paying $15, $16 an hour, you're not going to pay a tech $16 an hour.
Right.
You got to understand it's going to go up.
Yeah, and you always bring in an interesting perspective with your expertise on the service side as well, right? And our guest today, I'm going to bring him in right now. And Mr. Carl Shell, how are you doing?
I am doing wonderful today, West and Ken. What's cooking with you guys?
Oh, you know, we're cooking some managed print flat rate vibes as always, and really appreciate.
I saw all that and the snacks in the green room. Very hospitable. Thank you.
Yes, and there's a $5 surcharge for that, so just make sure you leave it
I'll
in the
be sure to
bowl.
leave you a $5 on the way out.
Yeah, well, cannot thank you enough for joining us today, and it's one of those things that I always love talking with you about what's going on in the industry because you do have a unique perspective, unlike those of us that are either consulting or providing managed print services or suppliers. You kind of get this bird's eye view of what's happening across the whole channel. So really appreciate you coming in today, you know, to speak with us about it, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, dealers, managed IT, these are two of my big topic areas. And I'm happy to spend the time with you guys most for sure.
Well, that's great. And for everyone that is tuned in, remember to leave your questions and comments during the conversation. This is being streamed live right now on LinkedIn. So thanks for tuning in if you're watching us there. Also on Facebook and also on YouTube. So just make sure you leave your comments where you would on any of those platforms usually, and we'll make sure we pick them up and can share them with the group. And one of the things that we always like to start with, Ken, is what?
Where are you from? It is a global movement. We have people that are doing flat rate in Australia. We have people that we work with in Europe, in the islands. You know, so flat rate is one of those things that's not just Ken and West's idea. You know, it's not just a U.S. thing, but it's a global issue and it's a global opportunity as well. So we like to know where our peeps are watching from.
Well, and you're from home today, so where is that? We were having a little discussion with Carl about that before we actually went live.
I live in Asheboro, North Carolina, which is like halfway between Raleigh, and Charlotte. And it's
so
cold outside, so my beach feels much warmer.
Yeah. So you're actually there today and not on a ship. And what about you, Carl? Where are you from?
I'm coming to you live today from the beautiful Garden State, New Jersey, best state in the country, most underrated state in the country. It is a little warmer here today than usual for mid-ish February, which is much to my chagrin, being a skier and a big snow hound. So,
Wow, I think we finally found something we don't agree on. Well, I'm experiencing kind of the same weather you are because I'm up in Canada, on Lake Erie, looking across the water at Buffalo. And I guess if I look over this way a little bit, then I can probably wave to you in New Jersey as well if I can see through Pennsylvania. And I am not a snow hound, and I am enjoying this warmer weather today. So really appreciate it.
I'm definitely in a minority there, West.
Well, listen, as this industry continues to change, there are real questions about what a dealer should do, right? And we'll jump through a bunch of those topics today on things that they can or should do. And maybe one of the first ugly ones that I'll put up here is acquisition realities, right? So that, in the consulting business, Ken and I were working with dealers that really I put them into three camps, right? One is office equipment dealers who are actually looking to be acquired. So they're probably at retirement age or, ready to hand off the business. The second group is actually handing the business off either to someone in the family or someone in the company that has come up through the ranks and is ready to, to develop that business, maybe add, keep it primarily managed print and office equipment with some, solutions tied to it. And then the third camp is like folks that are actually looking to, diversify and get into other services. And we'll get into those in a minute, but maybe we can talk to that a little bit, right? Because we have, seen so much. It's like every time I, check the news feeds or go on LinkedIn that there's another dealership that's acquiring someone else. So maybe take us through some of what you're seeing for the acquisition realities. And I'm going to pop myself into the green room so you got a little more space here to talk.
No worries, West. Yeah, I mean, interesting camps that you're bucketing into, obviously. Last year alone, there were 36 dealer acquisitions, according to Keypoint Intelligence data, research surveys, et cetera. That number is going down from 2019. It was actually back in like 2017, 2018, 2019, a lot of acquisitions, Marco really making a move, VET making moves, et cetera. Obviously pandemic, now supply chain. There's been kind of a decrease in that activity. When you look at that activity that's actually going on, you brought up the people who are looking to get out. Who knows how much their dealership is worth, et cetera. Maybe you've got smaller dealers, what have you. So for us, it's interesting to look at them in terms of revenue size, obviously. Of the dealers that were acquired last year, 11 of them were less than $1 million. So I don't know how much there is to write home about there. Probably acquisitions to maybe increase territory by a few miles, acquire a sales list, et cetera. Once you move up into the $1 to $5 million range, you see more activity. There's 8 million. So these are companies that, are obviously doing a lot better than the less than $1 million companies. But they're kind of in this, do we grow? Do we sell? They're kind of in this limbo area. And it appears that, our data supports the fact that a lot of these companies are kind of being taken off the board by other companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before we go any further, I just want to talk about that for a second.
Go for it.
That like 11 of them, were doing less than $1 million in revenue or acquired for that. And then obviously you have some bump up. Is that quite a shift from what we were seeing in 2019 or 2020? Were there bigger acquisitions happening then?
I unfortunately don't have that data at the ready, West.
Yeah, well, it's interesting,
Um,
and certainly I'm not expecting an answer, but I'd be curious to see if there's a trend there, right? To
I
see,
would definitely say that that less than 5 mil is your sweet spot for acquiring. At least that's what the data is showing. Once you get up to 5 to 10 million, it kind of drops off to only 6 acquisitions last year, and there was only one in the 10 to 20 range. Believe that was Applied Imaging acquired Paula Company in Michigan. So when you look at this data, it's intriguing, and you can obviously put the blame on certain things, cash flow, obviously due to COVID, and supply chain, what have you. Those are the two big ones. But the question, for me, being a writer, journalist to some degree, oftentimes podcaster, video guy, what have you, I have more questions than anything, and I think that you guys do too.
oh
Like,
yes,
why do we feel like companies in that 10 to 20 range will be more acquirable, I guess, once we're really behind the pandemic and the supply chain, which I know we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And over 20 million, there's no acquisitions whatsoever. So there's not one of those $50 million guys, almost up to 100 million once you get to the mega dealer range, which is about 100 mil. Where are these acquisitions going to happen? Are they going to happen? Have we reached a saturation point with the number of mega dealers, which is 15 to 20-ish right now? So is that money, is private equity or anyone else, hedge fund, whoever, do they want to invest in the print space right now? And do they want to acquire a company and create something like a Marco and Impact Networking, et cetera?
that's an interesting number you throw out there, and I didn't realize there were that many mega dealers, right? So did you hear that right? There's probably like 15 pretty significant mega dealers. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so when a few of my colleagues and I wrote an article for the BTA about 3 years ago, cover story, and we were talking about mega dealers because there was a big push, kind of branching these guys off of the rest of the pack, I guess. And we interviewed, I want to say 8 of the, I think at that time it was 12 or 13. So there have been some that have kind of come up through the ranks here.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, and I love the fact that we call them mega dealers, and you almost want to say it like,
Mega dealers.
yeah. And they've nailed the model, right? And that, like in our, the T100 group that we attend together, right? And congratulations on being a member again. We actually have a couple of, mega dealers around the call, and I'm always interested in hearing some of their perspectives and some of the things that they're doing, right? And it does strike me that they are, and again, we'll dive into this later, but the emphasis that they're also putting on technology services beyond print, right? So it's quite fascinating, right?
The whole diversification story. Go ahead, Ken.
And I wanted to interject. I'm going to add a fourth bucket to the list. And I think there's a lot more dealers in this bucket than maybe people think about. And those are dealers that have no exit strategy. They don't know what they're going to do. They're just going, and in fact, I would say they have no plan at all. Because I talk to so many dealers that have no 5-year plan. They have no, I'm sure they have no exit strategy. And I saw this when I was working with dealers at Sharp, that people had, maybe a vague idea of what they were going to do for an exit. One, and I use one as an illustration. He wanted to pass the business to his son. His son wanted to run a pizza parlor. He had an opportunity to sell and turned it down. And so the company he was going to sell that made him the offer just came in and took his clients away, and he had nothing left. And so it's like, and I encourage everybody that's listening and every dealer everywhere, they should have an exit strategy, because you are going to leave your business, whether it's in a box, you sell it, you pass it on, but at some point you have to leave. So what is the strategy? Box.
Here I am taking Ken out. I'm leaving Carl all by himself.
I got nervous there for a second, Wes.
Trying to get myself back in. It was just timely, Ken, what you actually said, because I interviewed yesterday. It's just so topical. A guy named Paul Rupert, and this is what he does: is he works with organizations that are either startups looking to do valuations, or companies that are looking to exit the business and didn't really plan to before, right? So you're right. There definitely has to be some kind of, some kind of plan there. And I'd be curious to see, like, I know the numbers aren't there, Carl, but just what, or maybe you do have some insights, just what people doing the acquisitions are looking for, right? Like when they see a good buy, what does that look like, right?
I think it kind of like diversification. There's a diversity in what you're looking for. I think the one thing that I always hear, and I like company culture, corporate culture. That's the one thing that always comes up as the company that is being acquired needs to mesh with the acquiring company's culture. A lot of times, Ken, to your point, they might have that culture, but they don't have the plan. Um, and when they get acquired, suddenly they actually do have a plan. And I don't want to say it's more of a purpose, but it definitely feels that way in a lot of times because you have, a lot of dealers out there. There's still over, how many dealers are there? Over 1,500 still, something like that. There's still a lot of them that are just kind of flailing in the wind and hoping for a magic bullet or, a miracle home run in the bottom of the ninth inning here. And that's just not going to happen. It really does require a lot of strategy and a lot of thought and a lot of time investment and financial investment at the end of the day. And some of these dealers, especially in the ones I was highlighting, you're looking at 29 of the 36 dealer acquisitions from last year being $5 million and less. These are people who, don't have the capital or they probably don't have the human resources to plan things out in the right way. Some of them might just be wanting to get out of the business. They have no interest. And, West, on the T100 calls, we talk about how difficult it is to bring youth into the print industry, right?
Yeah.
And I totally can understand why some sons or daughters of, mothers or fathers who own businesses, they don't want to go into it, and maybe that company doesn't have a presence in IT or is late to the game with production in wide format. Not the greatest example now because of supply chain and cartridges and everything, but you get my point. And that's totally, I buy that, so it becomes more difficult. And for me with the dealer acquisitions, I guess I think that they will go up as we move beyond the pandemic even more in things. I hate the word normal these days, but when they return to some sort of normalcy, which they are, I think that you'll see some more acquisitions and fewer dealers. But again, is there another one that's going to make that ascension from the $50 to $100 million range into the mega dealer range? And how saturated is that particular market right now?
Yeah. And I'm glad you're tracking the numbers because we'll get that picture over time, right? And I would be very interested to say 5 years from now to look at those trends from when it started to where we are today, right? And I don't like that word either, normal. I don't know if we should start, saying more like level set or something.
One of my colleagues loves that word level set.
Yeah,
so.
It's just kind of like wherever that is, because the level set might be up here, it might be down here, but at least we'll get to some kind of something that looks more like stasis, right?
Yep, exactly.
And it looks like we do have a comment from John. Supply chain sped up sales of business. Some just couldn't hold on. Yeah. And that's a big one. And I'm glad you brought that up, John, because we are going to, talk to that pretty quickly here as well, right? And maybe that's a good segue. I do have some points here, but we can jump around a little bit. And, based on what kind of John brought up, let's start talking about some OEM challenges, right? And certainly supply chain has been a big part of that. So let's talk there a little bit. What are you seeing for OEM challenges? And of course, supply chain is one that interests me. I'm not sure if you watch the news in Canada right now. The truckers just blocked the bridge leading from Windsor into Detroit, and that supplies literally 1/4 of all goods traveling between our two nations, right? So as if those issues weren't big enough. So I'll hand it over to you. Just talk about some OEM challenges right now.
Yeah, I mean the supply chain one is really the biggest one. You know, a lot of the OEMs are already diversifying through services, through IT services, whatever, and it's just a ramping up. It's like an arms race for the OEMs in terms of having the right piece at the right time and selling it and making money on it. The supply chain, you know, clearly a major problem, has been around. It ain't going anywhere anytime soon, it appears. Um, so, you know, for me, it's again, what else can you do? What can you sell that we don't need to keep in inventory? You know, nothing profound here. I'm reiterating what millions of analysts and pundits have already said. Um, but it is an issue, a big issue, and you know we're starting to see some government not mandates, initiatives, you know, diversifying where chips are produced, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of my quick take on that. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but
For sure. Yeah, and I'll also add that one of the things with supply chain issues, I mean, just seeing some of the examples of, to your point, selling what you got, that some of the manufacturers have actually been um, uh, instructing their customers on how to get around the chip issue on those cartridges, right? Which blew me away, and I'm not sure if you know more about that than I do. And I'm not mentioning names, but it's interesting, right? So it's like, yeah, don't put a counterfeit in the machine, but by the way, we're going to give you OEM cartridges that are going to look like counterfeits, and here's how you make sure the machine, actually takes it, right? And what other choice do they have, because of that, right?
it's yeah, whether you think whether you're skeptical about that behavior, dubious, whether you know you agree or you're really left with no choice. um, you know how people have reacted to the supply chain, and the chip shortage, is you're going to get a lot of diversity there too.
Yeah. And I can't remember who I was speaking with. It was a couple of weeks ago, but we were actually talking specifically about, kind of this idea of bringing chip manufacturing sort of back to North America, at least for a certain subset of those chips, right? And that still, even though it's now an initiative, that's probably not going to solve anybody's problem for what, 3 or 4 years, right? Like,
Yeah, you know, we were able to push through vaccines very quickly, thankfully. Um, but yeah, there's a development cycle there that's going to take time. You know, the interesting sidebar here is my wife recently got out of the automotive advertising industry. So it's, for us it's always funny because I work in the quote unquote copier industry and she worked in the automotive industry, and there's a lot of parallels between the two, a lot of differences between the two. um, Car manufacturers are having problems, but they're also, whatever they get, they're selling for almost above MSRP in some cases. um, and they can be doing quite well. It might look weird when you pass the parking lot for an auto dealer, and there's like 15 cars, and you're like, where are the cars? Well, we know where the cars are. They're not here. So it's yeah, I don't know. It's going to take a while to solve that, and there's such demand more than anything else. Whether it's Xboxes or cars or cell phones, right?
I want to say, and I want to inject to that too, because one of the things that it's done, and I was talking to a dealer the other day about this, is that it's dried up the supply of used equipment. Now it's hard to find because dealers are selling the used equipment because they can't install new equipment. Wes and I encourage using used equipment a lot because it provides a real opportunity in a flat rate environment to really improve your profitability. But the current challenges have basically sucked that supply dry.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about supply chain, pandemic, remote work, hybrid work, whatever, for me, the real star on the hardware side has been A4, clearly. But once the pandemic was here, and then the supply chain stuff started happening. Now you start bringing in remanufactured partners, and it's only a matter of time till that stuff is going to dry up as well. I mean, I totally agree.
I like Greg Walters coming in with his comment about car equals copiers, except it's B2C, right? And that's it. I mean, it doesn't have time to hit a showroom, right? It's literally
Nope. I mean, this is another thing. You know, my wife and I, we don't buy new cars. We don't lease new cars. We buy CPO cars. And there's a lot to be said about that, from a financial standpoint. And at this point, at this juncture, with the dearth of machines anyway, everyone's going to be looking for them.
I think
Someone's got to
so.
find them. Maybe you can find all of them on Amazon. I think they sell everything.
Yeah. Well, and there's a whole other conversation on Marketplace, right? And we've actually had those conversations. I know that you know one of the T100 members that we have in, and I just love having her perspective in there. You know, Valerie Aldhaidman, who really works on the consumer side, right? And looks at kind of what's you know, what's happening there, and that shift. And I think that's a challenge for the OEMs as well, right? Is the shift. It's always been happening. It's always been there, but with so many remote workers, as you mentioned earlier, that they're not going to be having big A3 footprints, that there's going to be a lot more of this A4 stuff. And kind of as Ken mentioned, they're pretty simple devices, and they still are, right? So there's a lot of room for, I guess, gently loved, is that a good term to use for a printer? Gently loved printers in the marketplace.
It's good enough, West. It's good enough.
Okay. I was thinking the other day, as you know, I used to do like a lot of assessments. I mean, for hundreds of companies. Probably my favorite one today was still in an airline hangar, and it was also the scariest day of my life, because as we're going through the hangar, they have these mobile print stations, right? And a lot of the devices they had on them, because they didn't have network connectivity in these mobile units, were like old HP4s and the HP5s. And the one room that they had basically a mobile command center set up with these printers and their computers and everything else. They had a full airplane stripped down to all the parts. So they're showing me everything, right? Like, here's what the turbine looks like. And I'm like, hold on a minute. Am I mistaken, or is that as thin as a razor blade? And he goes, no, you're not mistaken. That's why when birds hit an engine, they basically explode, right? Because everything. Yeah. And sorry, I tend to do this. I digress. But where I'm going with that is that, yeah, even in those days, depending on application, that the A4 printers obviously just made a lot more sense, right? And in that scenario, so I would think that in the remote world, that's got to be a huge challenge for OEMs, right? And I'm not going to mention names again, but as we're on the topic of OEMs, there's a recent piece of news for an OEM that was actually holding back, I think, on and hopefully I read this right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically had to lay a bunch of people off and are holding back off on some of the, not pension, but some of the retirement benefits or something, right? Like,
sounds shady.
Yeah, and it sounds like that shadiness comes from suffering, right? Like that they're definitely, it can't be a pretty world out there right now.
In a lot of ways, it's still not.
Yeah.
They're in a lot of ways, our industry, the print industry, is still very much hurting. Let's be honest. I guess we can segue here to some remote stuff. Me personally, you're looking at me in my office at work in Fairfield, New Jersey.
Yep.
I prefer to work here. I've got an office. I've got 2 monitors. I don't print. I used to print a little bit more, but I really don't. And we don't have everyone in the office. There's a group of us who come to the office, and we frankly don't want the people who are working at home to come to the office because we like it nice and quiet here. And it's a nice, cool group of people. Not that the other people aren't cool. They're all great, believe me, but they just prefer to work at home. And I'm not here to tell them which is better, because it works. I can work at home, but I prefer to work here. I get more done. There's still not a lot of printing going on, right?
No, there's not. I mean, I don't print anything anymore, right? So
yeah,
as we were talking before we started the show, I just closed on a house purchase, thank God, getting out of this crazy market. So for any of our viewers that are still stuck trying to find a place to live in the seller's market, I feel your pain. But everything, like the whole transaction, like everything was done via DocuSign and other methods, right? There's no paperwork at all. and I spent a lot of money without a single piece of paper, right? So those workflows are changing. Like you, I do work remotely. I've been doing so probably for close to 20 years now, I think, right? And you and I, Carl, have seen each other probably more this year than we've ever seen each other, even though it's, you know, kind of this virtual thing, right? So
It's great.
like we actually see each other, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing
Once a week, West. Once a week.
at least. I'm telling you. But you know, it's to be able to see each other. Like the technologies have caught up to a point. You remember in the early days of Skype or whatever, it was painful, right? You never knew when it was going to work properly. Or, I mean, every company I worked for probably 10 years was always investigating an alternative to whichever video application they were using.
Pretty much.
We don't have that conversation anymore. It's a question of, which one am I going to use in the next half hour, right? Like, is it going to be Zoom? Is it going to be StreamYard like we're doing now? Is it going to be
It's just part of your daily workflow.
Yeah. I mean, I touch probably on a daily basis 3 different platforms for this kind of thing, right? And you know, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Listen, the collaboration, and I think we're kind of getting into the IT portion now, but whatever. The collaboration throughout the pandemic is, for me, it's been very effective. You know, when a meeting is run properly and people participate and there's a goal and you walk out of there after 45 minutes or an hour, hopefully not 3 or 4 hours, and you come out with some tangible stuff to work on and to execute on. And you know, would this conversation be different if we were in person? Probably, but you know what? This is working great. So
yeah, I agree.
You know?
I wonder how much different it would be, right? And I do want to bring up Greg's comment again before we let it go, before we let it die. Is Egon Sengler a real person? Greg, you got to tell me, because that is the print is dead. Good old Egon Sengler. So send me the book.
Yeah, and I was just going to comment on the collaboration, because there are several things about what we just talked about. First of all, in the real world, we wouldn't have this meeting. We couldn't do this podcast because we're not anywhere near each other. You know, the cost of traveling for a 1-hour podcast makes it ludicrous. So we actually can do more now using the technology. I just looked at my calendar: 27 Zoom meetings this week.
that's too many.
Well, I give people my calendar and they schedule themselves. And
Are you bragging or complaining? If you're bragging, you need help. If you're complaining, with you. I love it. Well, that's great. So we do have someone coming back. LOL. Okay, so he stopped. Sengler. All right. Well, let's segue then into, as we're talking about remote work. There are different needs for customers, obviously, with remote work as well. Even in the office today, right? That, as you mentioned, with the acquisition trends that are happening, that they, you know, we see quite a few smaller ones. We're not seeing quite as many of the massive ones. And a lot of the ones that I'm looking at that are looking to grow are trying to figure out how to diversify, right? And I was kind of joking with you, Carl, earlier, right? Because we've had a big push for managed IT and cybersecurity are probably, you know, 2 of the biggest ones, right? But one of the dealers on our call, a very significant dealer in Chicago area, he's got into Pro AV and he's loving life, right? And then we have other people that are doing water services. And I know another Canadian up here, he's actually investing in alternatives for air filtration, so that they're actually water-based filtration instead of filters or something. I'm not sure how they work, right? But there's just so many things, right? So talk to us.
Sometimes there's too many things.
Right.
And I think it, you know, I'll put it back into the dealer perspective, you know, obviously, again, bring up Marco, Impact, RJ Young, et cetera. They have the capital to invest and they can move on things very quickly. When you're making less than $10 million, you know, things are maybe taken at a little more deliberate pace, and you need to do it over a longer period of time. You also need to be cagey about where you go in, because to your point, I don't think a dealer that is that's bringing in 2 mil in rev a year is going to have a lot of success with like a water filtration system, you know. um, Conversely, the larger dealer maybe has the inventory space to keep them in stock, and it's something that their salespeople, of which there are many more at a bigger dealer, are more adept at selling or bundling into a deal. You know, those are the kinds of things. So again, kind of bring it back to what Ken was talking about in strategy. You just really need to be cagey about what you want to do and how you're going to go about it. You know, when it comes to IT, um, it's well established. You can buy, you can partner, you can try to do it yourself. Um, those are the three. Those are the three main options. Feel free to add a fourth or a fifth if you want. But yeah, people need to. They need to diversify beyond print, and IT, for my money, is still where the best money is at. You know, it's a recurring model. We're beyond break fix at this point, long past it. Not that it doesn't exist; it still does to some degree. Um, and I think that companies are having more success selling services, you know, like a cybersecurity package. You know, if we had dialed it back maybe 3 or 4 years, I'm sure that there was not as much money in cybersecurity. But now, because of the pandemic, yet again, people working at home, you know, unsecured networks, all these kinds of things, you know, uh, dealers and managed service providers are seeing more money these days than that. You know, you bundling connectivity, there's other ways to connect. um, it all kind of ties together again with collaboration, etc. But when you're selling the service, and it can be an IT bundle, it could be cybersecurity, it could be a whole security bundle plus the collaboration and whatever you really want at this point, right? um, but you gotta take things in phases and stages, regardless of how big you are.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was moderated a panel for the BTA in Asheville back in the fall, and one of the things the panel all were in agreement on was the fact that as a company thinks about doing expansion, and they gave a lot of different things that they'd expanded to, and they said basically what you do is you first of all make sure your core business is solid, and then you pick one thing and you get that up and running, and then you add something else and you get that up and running. Because if you try to bite them all off at once, you're just creating an instant disaster. But it's about gradually implementing the pieces that you want to have your long range picture. And that's why I go back to I harp on at least a 5-year business plan, so that you can put those things into your plan and figure out, okay, what is my strategy? What am I going to bring in first? What's the time to get it up and stable? Those kinds of things.
Hmm. Yeah, it starts with one service. You know, if it's in the managed IT realm, great. Um, if it's in another realm, then you can just continue to build that part of the business out. Um, yeah, sorry.
No, don't be sorry at all. I'm going to bring in another question from our good friend Greg. This one I love because I don't even know the answer to this, but how much of the capital for the mega dealers is sourced outside the industry? And it's probably looking for like a percentage. And I would probably assume quite a bit, no?
It's a good question. And I'm not sure I'm answering it correctly, but you know, when I first started, I was at the Konica show years ago when Konica announced that All Covered was now under their roof, basically,
Yep.
and that was a pretty big deal. And now that I'm thinking about, that was probably 8, 9, 10 years ago already. That was in retrospect an even bigger move, you know, than it was at the time. It was still a huge move, but it really set a lot of the groundwork, in my opinion. And you know, over time, it was the same thing with software. You know, dealers are struggling to sell software. Dealers are struggling to sell managed IT, and slowly but surely, education has gotten better. Technology. Um, you know, I think a lot of youth being brought in where it can be brought in, certainly helps. Um, but we see, you know, more and more people doing it. when you talk about like a mega dealer, I would think, and having spoken to several of them, they really want to shoot for a 50% divide between print and IT. And I
Yeah.
think if I talk to some of those people now, because I haven't connected with them in a year or two, they might even be shooting for 60/40 at this point.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so. And I've got a good friend of mine actually, Jeff Bendix at Bendix Imaging, and I can remember years ago we were at a conference when he was just starting to do managed IT and cybersecurity. Nobody at that time was buying cyber. We talked about it. It was like, oh, he goes, yeah, I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it, right? Like, you know, until people are bitten, they're not buying it, right? Fast forward to today, and most of his business growth this year, 2021, I should say, came from the managed IT and cybersecurity side, right? And he says that now they lead every single deal with cybersecurity, and they fold everything else around it. And managed print is a piece that basically that they just fold into that. It's no longer a sale unto itself, right? So fascinating to see companies that have been successful at it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it Wes, really interesting because when I first came into the print industry, which is 15, 16 years ago now, software was becoming a bigger thing again, and the dealers kind of struggled to sell it. Um, I guess the better example is with mobile. We all started having smartphones and we needed mobile access to devices, or the OEMs wanted to give us access, and you have convenience and all the other factors that kind of get layered in here. Um, but with mobile, I never really thought that it was a big seller, and it definitely feels like it's just one of those bundled options at this point. But clearly, managed IT is not that. This is a much different kettle of fish, um, and the growth opportunities for dealers are going to be much healthier. Let's put it that way, than if they're not doing it.
Yeah, we've got a nice comment here from Paul that speaks to this, right? Dealers that do not offer IT solutions are finding it difficult to hire sales talent. And I would argue technical talent as well, right?
Mm,
Commercial salespeople are becoming shy of selling, only hardware, right? And I agree with you, Paul. I think that ship has moved on, right? I always told this story, and it kind of fits here. I think maybe I'm stretching it. You can tell me once I share it. But whenever I used to use this in some of my training programs, actually, and it's that when you sell a car, right? If you think of a car as a solution, don't think of it as a thing. Most people don't realize that the auto manufacturer does not make all those parts, right? So that they
no.
outsource the carburetor, the chips come from somewhere else. That there's probably, like, in one car, there's probably at least 400 different other companies that are producing those things independently of, say, Ford or Chevy or whatever, right? Um, and when we buy that car, we don't look at it and say, well, who makes the carburetor? Well, I don't want
No,
that
we don't.
manufacturer. I don't want that carburetor. I want you to get one from, the other company, right? And I think, to Paul's point, that's kind of how solutions work, is that we're becoming less concerned about the pieces and more about the overall, solution, right? And Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what happens with these sales reps now, is that's what they want to sell, is these business outcomes, this way to fix these problems, solutions, because it is frankly more exciting, right? And again, Paul, if you can tell me if I'm wrong on that take.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject that too. Is that what dealers need to think about and remember is that of a company's technology buy, that the paper output devices, printers, copiers, whatever they are, or actually anything that's touching the paper, whatever they are, is really a very small percentage of the company's technology spend. And so if we can tap into the bigger pieces that a company's spending on. I did a conversation with somebody recently, and we were talking about the fact that many dealers could probably double or triple their business if they just improved the penetration into their existing customers.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I'll throw some meat on that bone as well, right? That the average, because I love to think in the flat rate world in terms of per user or per seat, right? And that managed print, basically covers anywhere from $17 to $24 per seat, and I think that's pretty optimistic these days. I think it's obviously gotten a little lower. Um, But the equivalent to that in the managed IT side, if they're getting a pretty good piece of the customer stack, is anywhere from $125 to $200 per seat, right? So just to put that in perspective, where that opportunity is, like it's when we're talking about diversification, those returns are pretty real. And I know it's not that simple. I know there's lots of people that are doing it already, and that it's going to take us time to get that expertise. But whatever that ratio is, because I'm not good with math, but 17 versus even 150, I think there's a pretty good reason for doing so, right?
I mean, West, that's a perfect statistic to back the point, right? Excuse me. Hold on one second.
No, please do. Welcome to live stream, baby. Yeah, so Paul, great. Thanks for feeding that back to us on point. I'm glad that I was, because I am not always. Nice to know that it was on that one. I've had some humdingers.
West, when you give those two rates, you're looking at like $15 to $20 versus $120, $125. Is it no wonder that dealers want to get that IT piece? Novatech is a great example. They acquired a big MSP out of Atlanta, folded that in, and they have a really successful IT practice, to the point where they had to move beyond a few things that they were kind of known for, like additive manufacturing, for instance,
Yes.
Because it just is a better opportunity. And it's, again, Netflix, Amazon, subscription services, they're making a lot of money. Dealers, OEMs, they all want money too.
Yes. Yeah. And it's
so like, again, the dealer has the sales list. The MSP is never going to have the sales list that the traditional office equipment dealer has. So there is kind of like a nice handshake going on here, and it would be nice to see it grow even more, I guess.
Yes, I agree. And the one thing I would say there is that, I've been accused of, sort of diminishing the value of managed print when I talk about these growth opportunities.
How dare you?
I know. What I would say is, hey, look, a print is persistent, right? So there's going to be a certain amount of print that's always going to be around. And I would never get rid of it, because it's good, healthy business, but it's not the part where you're growing, right? And that's where acquisitions come in. And like, if you're truly growing in print, it's probably because you bought somebody, right? And if you're growing not through acquisition, either organically or even through acquisition, that bigger line share just has to be through a diversified service, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, one other point there, West, is years ago while working here at Keypoint Intelligence, I've obviously been on the Buyers Lab reporting side, that product type, where I worked especially on A4, and we've just seen a lot of growth over the years, and a lot of changes over the years. And now I can't even remember what the hell point I was making.
Well, that's okay.
I know it's a live stream, but I can't keep a straight face right now.
You mentioned Buyers Lab, and I was going to say that saved my bacon in so many assessments that I would do, right? Like, that was one of my primary resources when I was actually out in the field trying to build future states and understand what a current state, kind of looked like, right? Yeah.
Yep. Hey, and we still do plenty of that, but we're looking to do plenty of other things.
Yes, absolutely. And I know this afternoon, Anthony Sai is going to be on our Top 100 group talking about one of those things, right, on the e-commerce side. But you guys are doing so much right now. I can't believe some of the cool things that you guys are doing.
It feels rewarding, I'll be honest. Keypoint Intelligence with the Buyers Lab and the InfoTrends product types that we have, whether it's market research or product research, market level research versus product, and testing, of course. There's a lot going on, and security cameras, another big one that we didn't even touch on today. Additive manufacturing, e-commerce, and sales enablement. Yeah, I mean, it's very good. And I hate to do all the shameless plugging here at West. I think we're nearing the end, but I do have one more, specifically about dealers and the statistics that everyone heard today. We do on the through one of our services, the Info Center, we do have a channel strategy service that has a lot of neat data, cool data, intelligent data, and implementable data, if that's even a word. So would suggest, if you have questions about that, definitely reach out to me. Always love a good conversation. I've really enjoyed this time here today, West and Ken. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't thank Anna for joining us for this. These are always my most exciting conversations when we, get to kind of really bounce around the board a little bit, because you do touch so many things, right? And for anyone is interested, I've got the Keypoint website up there. You can certainly, find it there at keypointintelligence.com. And of course, you can reach out to myself or to Ken or to Carl, all on, LinkedIn as well, right? So
Yep.
however you want to find that stuff.
So when do we get to do this again, West?
I'm telling you, man, we do
This
these,
was a lot of fun.
we do these once a week, so we will figure out the next time. I always love having you on as a guest, and we will definitely, make sure that we get you back on again soon, right?
Well,
And
I hope that it was a good time for you guys. I hope that next time we can spend a few more minutes talking about Star Wars, West.
Yes.
And and I very much look forward to seeing you at 3 p.m. Oh, yeah, there you go. Here, I brought along some toys myself here today.
Oh, come on.
Wait, hold on.
Oh, there you go.
As West, you well know, I am a huge music lover, and that's probably the greatest band that ever walked the face of the earth. I don't know.
Absolutely. What a nice way to go out. And to all of our viewers that have watched today, may the force be with you.
That's a good one,
Yeah.
West.
So it has
Cheers.
been so fun.
All right.
Thank you so much, guys. Great
See
time.
everybody next week.
Be well.